The so-called doomsday clock is now 90 seconds to midnight, the closest the world has ever been to global nuclear catastrophe. The movie Oppenheimer has brought into consciousness the real heroes of real nuclear war again. Russia and the U.S. are on hair-trigger nuclear alert. And on this 40th anniversary of the 1983 TV movie The Day After, director Nicholas Meyer is revisiting Lawrence, Kansas, as PBS gears up to release a documentary about the TV movie that might have just saved the world.
I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top-secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
Wow, first of all, what a question.
Journalism is about telling the truth, all while ferreting out the bottom line.
I'm a Harrison Hellraiser.
With me, Cary Harrison, as your guide.
Rethinking Heroes, Life After the Military with Cary Harrison.
And it is Rethinking Heroes. Welcome. Happy Friday or whatever day. If you're streaming, podcasting, it doesn't really matter. You're here with us, and that is what does matter. This year, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, founded by Albert Einstein in 1947, has moved the hands of the so-called doomsday clock forward because of the mounting dangers of the war in Ukraine. The clock now stands at 90 seconds to midnight, and that's the closest to global catastrophe as it has ever been. And 2 weeks ago, we had a reporter live in Palestine, you might remember, whose signal was cut off before our broadcast. We still have not heard whether he was one of the 13,000 now reported dead there. Geopolitics used to be about just marching soldiers slowly covering real estate. Now it's drones, smart bombs, even AI currently operating fully autonomous weapon systems. With the ever-expanding war in Ukraine and the giant nuclear power plant in that area down to one single emergency generator cooling the entire facility, both Russia and the U.S. on hair-trigger nuclear alert, how many people would die from starvation just 2 years after a global nuclear war? Well, here's a sobering number. How about 5,341,000? And if you think you're going to survive it by moving to New Zealand, it's too late. Depending on when you were born, you might remember a famous TV movie, which may have quite literally saved the world. If you're hearing this on a podcast or live stream instead of any of our different over-the-air radio stations, you may be of an age where you didn't know that a TV movie could rock the world. Well, back then, a TV movie was like Netflix. Everyone had it and everyone watched it. And that was 40 years ago when ABC made a TV movie called The Day After during the Ronald Reagan presidency and the height of the Cold War. This 1983 movie was watched by over 100 million Americans, over 200 million Russians, and hundreds of millions, again, all around the world. The Day After literally shook a nation. It rattled President Reagan, helped lead to history's biggest decline in nuclear weapons. Imagine a TV movie leading to history's biggest decline in nuclear weapons. Let's have more, shall we? And now we're all about to see a documentary on PBS called Television Event, all about that, and all about how that single movie changed a nation. If you're a streamer, you can go to our website at rethinkingheroes.com to get more information. Also sign up for our newsletter where we can send you links for that, just under the Contact Us, and you'll find more information. With me right now is the director of The Day After, Nicholas Meyer, who also gave us Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Volunteers with Tom Hanks, The Deceivers, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, the HBO film Vendetta with Christopher Walken, plus screenplays and contributions to Summersby and Fatal Attraction and Prince of Egypt, among many, many others, including the Netflix series Medici, Masters of Florence, starring Dustin Hoffman, and Star Trek Discovery for CBS All Access. And I do thank you for that, Nicholas. I have been watching it and enjoying it. Nicholas Meyer directed a history-changing TV movie, this one that we're talking about, The Day After, and it remains the single most watched television film ever made. 100 million people in one night. Nominated for 14 Emmys, director Nicholas Meyer, I want to welcome you to Rethinking Heroes.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I'm not sure I belong in the heroic category, but I'll take it. That's what we do in Hollywood.
Yes, that's exactly what we do in Hollywood, and we build a pantheon, and it has more than 5 people in it. It has as many people as we need to be in it, because what artists do is they reflect real life back to people who wouldn't ordinarily be able to see it with their own eyes or access it with their own eyes. And that's what you do when you create these projects, put them in front of 100 million people, and literally change the world. So, it's not like you were tired on a Tuesday and thought, what shall I do today to stir up some you know what I mean? You knew what you were doing. And let's talk about that. You're heading back to the original filming location of The Day After, Lawrence, Kansas, to premiere this PBS documentary about your film. Why Lawrence, Kansas?
This film was the brainchild of a man named Brandon Stoddard, who was then the head of ABC Circle Films, which was their movie of the week division. And Brandon had made a big hit with a television series called Roots. And he was looking for a follow-up to Roots, something big. And he had gone to see a movie called The China Syndrome with Jack Lemmon and Michael Douglas and Jane Fonda, which was about an accident at a nuclear power plant. And it came out the same week that the meltdown at 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania happened. So he got to thinking, and what he thought up was, what would a nuclear war between the United States and, as it was, the then Soviet Union look like? Not about military, not about government, not about policy, but just how it would be experienced, let's put it mildly, by regular folk. And he looked at a map and figured out that Lawrence, Kansas was somehow pretty much the geographic center of the continental United States, and commissioned a writer named Edward Hume to write a screenplay about people going about their business in and around Lawrence, Kansas, and they get nuked.
And they do. And it's so realistic, and all the behind the scenes stuff of the Hollywood hocus pocus of the day, giant fans that could blow winds at hurricane levels. I mean, it really was extraordinarily real. And I saw it as a little kid, and it terrified the bejesus out of me. It also apparently affected President Ronald Reagan, who had been told that you can win a nuclear war, and you should. And it's a great idea. And he watched this and apparently had nightmares. You gave the President of the United States nightmares.
Well, apparently I did. This is not speculation. He, in his memoirs, he, number one, talks about how upset and distressed the movie made. Ronald Reagan, like everybody else, has been raised, or was raised, on 100 years of Hollywood happy endings. Certainly that was his own experience as a Hollywood film star. So he wasn't prepared, as most of America was not prepared, and certainly not network TV, whose main business is to sell advertising, to see anything like this. The second source for Reagan's reaction was his biographer, Edmund Morris. Edmund Morris had previously won the Pulitzer Prize for his biography, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. And he was Reagan's official biographer and lived in the White House for 3 years. And in the biography, he recounts Reagan's extreme, distraught reaction after seeing the movie. I also heard it from Morris's own lips, because I got to know him when I was adapting the screenplay of The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt for Martin Scorsese. And he said to me the only time he ever saw Reagan flip out was after he saw the movie. And by the way, this is not an uncommon reaction. Stalin, of all people, used to say that, when a child falls down a well, that's a tragedy. But when millions die, that's statistics. And what The Day After did, however clumsily it did it, was to give you a look beyond those statistics at what nuclear war would look like when those missiles take off. And there was a general on Castro's staff who, having seen the movie, said that the Cuban Missile Crisis had not been real to him until he saw the movie. So that gives you some idea of why and how people were so affected by The Day After.
So, director Nicholas Meyer, what challenges did the team behind The Day After, your movie, what did they face in bringing this in really as a vivid depiction of nuclear war to television screens, particularly in the face of corporates, sponsors, and White House pressures?
Well, to begin with, nobody at ABC television, remember there were only 3 networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Everybody at ABC hated this project. They hated the movie from the get-go because they knew that they would lose sponsors. Remember, that business, that network television is advertising. Yeah. And indeed, they lost all their sponsors. General Foods, General Motors, General Mills, all the generals headed for the hills.
Including the generals in the military, I imagine.
Everybody, well, what happened with the military was that the military offered cooperation. They offered men, material, equipment. They offered helicopters, battleships, whatever you want, on one condition, that we made it clear that the Soviet Union started the war. And we told them to get lost, take a hike. And we did it without military cooperation. So you have, on the one hand, the network not wanting to make the movie, the sponsors not wanting to sponsor it. I think we had Orville Redenbacher popcorn. They were in it for a little while. But, this is the only movie ever made for network television that didn't stop for commercials.
But it had popcorn.
It had popcorn. And we made it without military cooperation. Reagan's response to the movie can be divided really into 2 parts, sort of before he saw it and after he saw it. Incidentally, your listeners might like to learn that in addition to the documentary, a new book was published last week, November 15th, which is called Apocalypse Television, or Television Apocalypse, How the Day After Helped End the Cold War, by Professor David Craig. And it's a pretty even-handed, very well-written book, which recounts my humble, self-effacing egomania pretty good. And it gets a few details wrong about the tug of war in the cutting room over the editing of the movie, and that was another tug of war, because there was I should say that I was not the first director to be asked. What the big problem about nuclear war is that nobody wants to think about it, including me. This is the most urgent question, along with climate change, that's ever confronted the human race. 1945, our ability to destroy ourselves. And it's so bad. We know it's out there, but we don't like to think about it. In the words of George Bush, go shopping. Go shopping and buy more and more and hope that it won't happen. But hope, as somebody observed, is not a strategy. And as I say, I was not the first director to be asked. They worked their way down to me. And I was being psychoanalyzed at the time. And my shrink, who never spoke, listened to me mumbling on about how to not direct this movie. And I was saying things like, well, I've done Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I've done the time after time. Directing a TV movie, that's really a step down for me, isn't it? Yes, it is. And he said, well, I think this is where we find out who you really are.
We are in complete control. We are
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Are you juggling multiple tools to run your online business? Well, thankfully, there's a better way, and it's called Kartra. Kartra. With Kartra, boosting your income has never been easier. That's because it's the ultimate all-in-one platform for online success, offering every tool you need to grow. Imagine building pages, funnels, courses, autoresponders, and checkouts all in one place for one affordable price. And the best part about Kartra is that you can automate anything. So it's like having a team of experts working around the clock to help you earn more. Ready to streamline and scale? Well, visit rethinkingheroes.com/money for a free 30-day trial. That's rethinkingheroes.com/money for a free 30-day trial.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call now.
Listen while it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And I'm going to play you a little piece of audio. This is from the federal government. It's tiny. And they were just reminding people every day, you're probably going to die of a nuclear attack. Just get ready for it. But it's done so kind of blithely and glibly. I mean, like it's almost funny. The best part is the very end when they tell you, really, there's nothing you can do. Here it is.
I beg your pardon. There's been an interruption. But in today's world, we live with the continuing possibility of such interruptions as we contemplate the shape of Muscus agaricus, or poisonous mushroom. It is an ominous fact that man's knowledge allows him to obliterate his very civilization if he chooses. Modern science has provided bombers which can span continents and oceans. Guided missiles are expected to fly at supersonic speeds. Bombers can deliver the H-bomb. Missiles may have H-bomb warheads. The A-bomb, which did this to Hiroshima, is now a mere firecracker in today's lineup of thermonuclear pyrotechnics. The explosive power delivered by all bombs dropped by U.S. planes in World War II did not equal that released by the recent test explosion of an H-bomb. How much heat does an H-bomb produce? The temperature on the surface of the fireball is as great as that generated on the surface of the sun. If sudden nuclear warfare should hit America, people will have to take care of themselves. The military would have a war to fight.
People will have to take care of themselves. You're at the self-serve pump because the military is fighting a war, except that the military is toast also. And that's what you showed us in the movie. There is no force that's hanging around doing anything except ducking and covering. We saw the actor Jason Robards, and this is what I remember burnt into my memory is almost no hair left from the exposure to the radiation, staggering through the streets, that kind of stuff. How aware were the other actors on the set of The Day After, like Jason Robards or Steve Guttenberg, whom we had hoped to have on the show today, but his last-minute shooting schedule made today's appearance not possible, but all the others? Like, how aware were they of what they were actually doing?
That's a very interesting question. Actors who are kind of amazing people, they do things that the rest of us spend our lives avoiding doing, which is to reach down into their souls and expose themselves as they are able to simulate responses to terrible situations. But in the process, they wind up learning a lot of things that they never knew. I dare say that when Christopher Nolan hired Cillian Murphy to play J. Robert Oppenheimer, he may never have even heard of J. Robert Oppenheimer before he became immersed in the life of that particular individual, or Helen Mirren playing Golda Meir, as she now is doing. So the actors learn along the way, and they're being sensitive and impressionable people. What you're learning, particularly about nuclear war, all the stuff we'd rather not learn, is simply it's just terrifying. And very upsetting. And they had nightmares. I did not. I was very busy trying to make the movie and navigating the political minefield into which I found that I was wading. You said a minute ago that I was trying to make a good movie, but I wasn't.
I would assume.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
This was a learning curve for me. I began by thinking that I wanted to make a good movie, but then I realized that if the movie was really good in terms of cinema, that people would talk about the movie and they wouldn't talk about the subject, which no one wants to talk about, which is nuclear war. So what I really wanted to make was a kind of public service announcement. If you have a nuclear war, this is what it might look like. P.S. on a good day. I didn't want to make something on the one hand so terrible that people would reach for the clicker for the remote and just shut the thing off or go to another channel. We didn't want that. But I also didn't want standout movie star performances. I didn't want brilliant cinematography. I didn't want a catchy title song. In fact, I didn't.
Shirley Bassey.
I didn't want music.
Right.
There's very little music in the movie because I didn't want to be accused of goosing people's emotions, of editorializing. I just wanted to say, and Brandon Stoddard wanted the same thing. He didn't want to say who started it. He didn't want to say what it was about, because you and I will never know what it's about. We'll just be toast. And we won't know who started it, period, the end. And we'll be toast if we're lucky, because the survivors will envy the dead. So I was trying to make a very simple kind of building blocky type movie that just showed people like us, going around and leading our lives and then getting zapped.
You were dealing with actors. You had dealt with sci-fi. We had The Day the Earth Stood Still in, what was that, 1959 or something? Robert Wise. That was the first movie that ever scared the living you-know-what out of me, with Gort the robot. All of this is sort of a retelling of that, because that's what that was about. This was what that was about. And still, I don't think you're going to find anyone over the age of like 50 who has not heard of The Day After and did not see it, and suddenly has that reaction in their gut when they find out you're the guy that did it. Do you experience that a lot?
What I hear about are a lot of bad parents, because people who are, say, oh yes, I saw this when I was a kid and it totally traumatized me. And all I could think of is, what kind of parents did you have that would dream of allowing a child to watch this movie? That just, they should go to juvenile court or something. But what can I tell you?
You said it earlier. We had 3 networks: ABC, CBS, NBC. Where are you going to go? You could go to UHF and watch The Little Rascals or The Three Stooges. I mean, this was the American Broadcasting Corporation. This is where we got our news at night. This is where we got our soap operas in the afternoon. So this was the movie of the week. And the network was promoting their movies of the week, must-see TV and all this other business. So we just sat down and enjoyed.
Well, ABC was not promoting this. Again, if you look at Jeff's documentary, if you look at this new book, Apocalypse Television, you will learn that ABC was, by this point, terrified of the movie. They had always hated it from the get-go. I never realized this until I saw Jeff's documentary, that there were Brandon Stoddard's life was threatened. He found a note on his windshield and said, this could have been a bomb. The conservative movement, largely led, I think, by William Buckley and a woman named Phyllis Schlafly, who said that, the nuclear weapons were God's gift to America or something like that. We're running up and down like Chicken Little, yelling that the sky was falling if this movie was to get on the air. And there's nothing like being banned in Boston to attract, book sales, and being told, don't watch this movie, helped make it the success that it became. without that controversy and the aid of the nuclear freeze movement, which decided to cash in on this movie, you could argue the movie two ways, and people did. Initially, Reagan's idea was to say, well, this movie proves that my policies are right. Remember, he came to office believing in a winnable nuclear war. You remember George C. Scott and Dr. Strangelove saying, Mr.
Yes.
President, I'm not saying we're not going to get our hair mussed, but 10, 20 million dead tops. Again, that's that abstraction, the statistical abstraction. But they say that one picture is worth 1,000 words. And you start to see, which the day after shows you, what the effects of a nuclear series of missiles and bombs do. And then you can't quite sort of dismiss it as 10, 20 million abstract people, because you're just watching human beings, and it ain't pretty.
Yeah, Director Nicholas Meyer, I was in Nagasaki a couple of years ago, and I went to see where we had dropped the first of the one of the nuclear bombs. It was Fat Man and Little Boy, and Nagasaki's completely rebuilt, as is Hiroshima, but they've left an area, a square area where things used to stand, and you still see charred brick. But every day there are thousands of school children that come through and visit this and learn about the history of it. And I remember standing there, and I don't think I've cried since I was a teenager, because I live in the American culture, and we all know you can't cry if you're male. And so I hadn't done this, you see. I forgot how it worked. There's apparently tear ducts and other bits of plumbing that I'd forgotten about. And I'm standing there surrounded by these kids, and I friggin' started weeping. And I couldn't stop. Here I'm having recall. It was just so palpable and real. And then, like the ugly American, I start apologizing. I can't be the first one who's ever done that. But it helps to do that. And what your movie has done for those who will not get to Nagasaki or Hiroshima is you walk us through what it looks like for our own fellow Americans to be in exactly that state. And then you presented something interesting in the movie where people got hostile. Jason Robards at the end was telling someone to leave his home. I mean, what else did he have? Nothing. You know, a piece of charred brick and a lean-to. But there were people sitting there taking shelter, but that's all he had left. So we actually also see what happens to people when desperation is so acute.
I also should remind your listeners or inform them that there have been a series of nuclear accidents and close calls. Were you aware that 2 nukes were once dropped on North Carolina?
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call now.
Looking to earn more money online? Well, meet Kartra, that's Kartra, the ultimate all-in-one business platform that makes it easier than ever to boost your income. With Kartra, creators, coaches, and experts can turn their knowledge and services into profits. You can create pages and funnels that attract customers, build memberships that share your knowledge, automate your business to free up your time, and so much more. Kartra has every tool you need to grow your business in one place. And the best part? It's super affordable and easy to use. Are you ready to streamline and scale? Well, head on over to rethinkingheroes.com/money for a free 30-day trial. That's rethinkingheroes.com/money for a free 30-day trial.
Preventing truth decay.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
There have been a series of nuclear accidents and close calls. Were you aware that 2 nukes were once dropped on North Carolina?
In the 50s, right?
I think so. Late 50s, yeah. They didn't go off. Or what about the monkey wrench that dropped into a missile silo in Arkansas and almost precipitated a chain reaction that was going to wipe out all of Arkansas? And then there was Colonel Petrov, the Russian officer who had the smarts not to respond to an incoming, what looked like 4 incoming missiles from the United States. And Yuri Andropov, who was very old, the Soviet premier, was convinced that Ronald Reagan was going to attack. And here are these 4 missiles coming in, and everybody in the watch room in the listening post is crying and throwing up. And Petrov thought, well, if they want to attack us, why are they only sending 4 missiles? I don't think this is missiles. So he didn't call the Kremlin. So they didn't push the button. And for having saved the world, he was drummed out of the military and sent to Siberia. But he did wind up at the UN, introduced at the General Assembly as the man who saved the world. Big close call. Incidentally, all he wanted was to meet Kevin Costner, because he had a VHS copy of The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston, and he wanted to meet Kevin Costner, and he did. But as Daniel Ellsberg and others have said, luck is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Right now, for example, when people say, well, what could we do about this? The first thing we could do is write your congressman, write your senator, and say, let's get rid of all our land-based missile silos that make us sitting ducks. We're all sitting with a target on our back. At this point, everybody who wishes us ill knows where those missile silos are, not only in Lawrence, Kansas, but all over the continental U.S. Get rid of those, and leave it to the Polaris submarines. Those are mobile, those are hidden, and just take that step back for a start. But don't just sit there and say, I'm going shopping, because a nuclear war is going to ruin your whole Black Friday sale.
It'll be a Black Friday, all right. That's the point. Yeah, it's doom time. Director Nicholas Meyer, before we bring in another director of the PBS documentary called Television Event about your movie The Day After, I would love to, but we can't here, but maybe another time, if you're feeling open and ambitious, to have you back on to talk a little bit about Star Trek, my favorite franchise ever, the book you wrote about it, and some of the other cool stuff you do, because who doesn't want to talk about that? That said, and now that we're sitting and basking in the glory of his achievements, let's jump over and say hi to the director of the PBS documentary called Television Event. That's going to be another for real television event. And not only does it provide behind the scenes footage of what really went on at the network level, but you're going to find that director Jeff Daniels has been active, not just talking about the problem, but really doing something about it. So let's say hi to Jeff. And before watching the groundbreaking nuclear Holocaust TV movie The Day After, Ronald Reagan was egged on by officials who believed he could fight and win a nuclear war. But as he says in his memoirs, The Day After film left him deeply depressed. With us is Jeff Daniels, director of the PBS documentary Television Event, multi-award-winning independent director-producer specializing in feature-length documentaries. And for 20 years, Jeff has directed and produced observational, investigative, and authored documentaries for both television and theatrical release. Theatrical means movie theaters, by the way, and is currently producing a number of, I know you have to say that to
remember
people.
Those,
Broadway,
yeah.
Broadway, why, yes, and Tony's, he can sing. He's currently producing a number of feature-length and short documentary films, as well as promotional-style projects for nonprofits. Get this. He was also a high school teacher for 15 years and a visiting university lecturer. So the stuff that matters in life matters to him. Jeff Daniels also facilitates mentoring and educational opportunities for teens and early career practitioners who are entering the film industry. And director Jeff Daniels, I want to welcome you to Rethinking Heroes.
Great to be here, Cary. Thanks.
So you've jumped in right in the middle of our boiling frogs here, and we realize that many of us are out of sight, out of mind, or never even knew about it. But you're smack dab in the middle of not only retelling a story, but it has reawakened in you what's really happening today. So here we've got this PBS documentary. What is it we're going to see?
You're going to see a time when television had an influence that you really just don't see these days with our fragmented media landscape. A time where you could have 100 million people watching the same thing at the same time. It shows the power that television, but also that artists can have to try and find some way to translate the complications and the horrors of, in this case, nuclear war in a way that is not just digestible, but prime time entertainment. I just felt that this film, that period, and what Nicholas Meyer was able to achieve with his cast and crew was something worth documenting.
Well, and you have, and I've been lucky enough to see a lot of the behind the scenes footage that I didn't know that exist. I knew there was behind the scenes, but you have like little kids being interviewed back then in the gym where they're being scanned with dosimeters to find out if their thyroids are glowing, all practice, because that's what one did in school. Between math and geography, you went and had your thyroid scanned for radiation. And I mean, this is just how one lived. And to get that part, that this was like, and it's worse today. That's the thing, is the doomsday clock is 90 seconds to midnight. And this is part of what you do with overlaps with the United Nations and bringing all of this awareness to the world in different ways, not only through PBS, thank God, definitely the most single watched network nowadays. Just like in public radio, we have the halo effect and are considered the better version of the crap that's out there. But that's where you are. You're in the non-crap pile because your stuff is really important. How does PBS react to this? Are they nervous a little like ABC was?
I think that public broadcasters are far more gutsy in showing independently produced films that are driven by their creatives, driven by the directors and the producers that were behind this film. That's why I'm so glad to have our film broadcast on PBS. Usually, I think this is also why I found it so interesting that Nicholas Meyer, someone who had his own personal reasons for being driven to make this film, and everyone had their own intentions, they were trying to speak to the broadest possible audience. And so by working with television and trying to have this give and pull, almost impossible compromise between someone such as Nicholas Meyer and everything that he'd achieved before, his personal intentions behind the film, and the need to make something that showed that whoever pressed that button is irrelevant. We are going to be living in a world that where our future is unknown, and living a life that is not worth living. That's what Nicholas Meyer brought to this, and so I think it's very appropriate to show to a public broadcaster that appreciates how all of that works and how you try and bring these types of messages to broad audiences.
Amen to that. I'm going to do a quick confession to two directors, director Nicholas Meyer and director Jeff Daniels. My father was at a SAC base back in the 1950s, before the movie Dr. Strangelove. And my father was a roaring alcoholic and used to, drive Porsches around as fast as he could in a circle, thinking he would win. I'm sure he probably did with himself. But he was an officer, and this is before the fail-safe system, and he had the codes, and he decided, as a good John Bircher, you can Google that if you're listening on a stream and have no idea what that means. He was a good John Bircher and decided just to dispatch the Russians. Let's just handle this and get it done with, as if nothing's going to happen over here in Ellsworth, South Dakota. And he read the codes, and the pilots balked. They balked. They knew him from getting hammered in the officers' club, but still, they balked. And thank God, this is another wrench that Nicholas Meyer talked about. This is another double.
Are you saying, excuse me, that your father was General Buck Turgid? General Jack D. Ripper from Dr. Strangelove?
Yeah. My mother told this story to me about 10 years ago. They had been long divorced and he had already died. And she just, she had been heartbroken about it forever and terrified because he got that close. And because these pilots had never done this before in their generation, and they all remembered Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they balked. There was no like higher level to 2 keys and this and that. And you go through the sequence where it's so robotic and so trained that you're actually willing to do it. This was like, just open the bomb bay, just let it go. And they didn't. So this stuff happens so much more often than any of us knows about. We just know the public stories. And Jeff Daniels, you and your Impact Producers plans, you're going to utilize this documentary that we're going to see on PBS, the documentary about Nicholas Meyer's The Day After. You're going to be using it as an educational tool during the what's called the States Parties meeting at the UN. So you're going to get it right in front of all the grown-ups.
When is it going to be on the air?
It's going to be on the air towards the middle of next year. So we're going to receive a broadcast date soon. It'll be broadcast.
The sooner it's on the air, the better, Jeff. The way things are going.
Absolutely.
Well, there's air to be on.
I hear that. Yeah. I mean, this film really hit me the day after, and documenting how a film like this could be made from a network like ABC, the network that gave us Happy Days, The Love Boat, and Fantasy Islands, about to drop a nuclear bomb on the American living room. I just thought, hey, how in the hell could a film like this get made? And it just shows what it takes to try and get someone like Nicholas Meyer and so many of the other people who work with him, Stephanie Austin and Bob Papazian, and all these people who believed that what they were doing by presenting just the effects of a nuclear war, what that can do in terms of affecting a person emotionally, so that they're connected to this otherwise really complicated subject that requires levels of understanding. It hits them on an emotional level. It hits them personally, so that they understand and have a sense of urgency to do something about this. And so this is why I'm so glad to join my Impact Producers, Arthur Kanigas and Melanie Bennett, who run an organization called The World Is My Country, and they're very much involved in anti-nuclear activities, specifically with ICAN, which stands for the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. They just recently won the Nobel Peace Prize for their work setting up a treaty with the UN that to abolish nuclear weapons, which to date 69 countries have signed on to. And what they do is they put the companies that create these nuclear weapons into a position where they have to either deal with their country or not. And so far, 2 out of the 20 companies in the world that make these nuclear weapons have stopped doing so. So they're actually creating practical measures to try and do something about the horrific situation of what seems to be a coming arms race once again. I'm so happy to represent my film, to speak with delegates as I am here in New York, and with other campaigners and scientists to present my film, and also try and really push this message that artists are necessary at times like this to translate issues we'd rather not confront into ways that are urgent and personal, as they should be, so that we can work collectively to act.
We are in complete control. We are
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
If you served in the Marine Corps, by now you know about the contaminated water problem at Camp Lejeune. If you were stationed or worked at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987, you probably have a lot of questions. We have some answers. You could be entitled to compensation. Billions of dollars are being allocated to pay for damages to anyone stationed at Camp Lejeune during that time. Unfortunately, it appears that officials may have known the contaminated water problem existed and did little to protect their men. The Semper Fi code was not honored. If you or someone in your family has developed a serious illness, including various forms of cancer, call this Camp Lejeune legal support line right now. You can't turn back the clock and change what happened, but you can certainly call right now and learn your rights as a Marine. Here's the number:
Call 855-348-5936. That's 855-348-5936. 855-348-5936.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call Low Cost Airlines. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call now.
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
I don't want Brandon Stoddard to be lost in the shuffle here. He was not an artist. He was an executive. He had done after-school specials, and he did Roots. And he had to threaten to resign unless they put this movie on the air. That he was a lone voice. The movie was made because of him. I'd also like to quote Jason Robards, who, when he was offered the role in the movie, said, "Well, this beats signing petitions." So he was, definitely committed as well. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the people behind ABC. Stu Samuels as well was part of this real push and pull in terms of what can work on television. And I was glad that we were able to get him into the mix with our film, a kind of vice president, network executive figure who may not understand everything involved in creativity and trying to put out an important message, but he knew television and what would work on television. It's unbelievable how all these different people with different perspectives came together to create a film the day after that had such an unprecedented impact.
Does having a conscience and an appetite for a better world come with a difficult price sometimes for you guys?
Yeah, I think Nicholas Meyer has a lot to say about this, it really. When you're trying to gain, I guess what I'd like to say about this really is the work of people like Nicholas Meyer, films, documentaries that document these moments. What I'm hoping people can gain from them is an understanding of what collectively they can do to make a difference. It's so appropriate for me to show this film in Lawrence, Kansas, to have a theatrical launch in the United States, in Lawrence, Kansas, a community that in the thousands participated in the making of the day after. Your show, Rethinking Heroes, how appropriate for this. Heroes are very much in the collective, and it takes individuals sometimes working together to create these creative works to help galvanize large amounts of people so that they are able to work collectively to affect the kind of change that is really necessary, especially at moments like this. So, that's it becomes worth it to facilitate that as an individual and to get other people behind you.
Regrettably, we're out of time. And if I remember historically, Lawrence, Kansas also fought to be slave-free in its history. So it really is a special place, a place that you both have picked to go back and bring the cast and crew of the day after and have a big old hootenanny and then present this new PBS special, which I highly recommend people watch. You can go get our newsletter. We're going to give you all the information as we learn it simply by going to rethinkingheroes.com and under the Contact Us. I want to thank you so much, Nicholas Meyer, director of The Day After, award-winning author, screenwriter, director, your body of creative work in publishing, film, and television, more than 5 decades, Star Trek II, Volunteers, under HBO, Fatal Attraction, Prince of Egypt, Star Trek Discovery, The Day After, still the single most watched television film ever made. 100 million people in one night. Who wouldn't want to access that nowadays? And then, of course, nominated for 14 Emmys. Also with us, the wonderful director and obviously man of good humor, Jeff Daniels, director of the PBS documentary about The Day After. called Television Event. Multi-award winning independent director, producer, speaking and featuring on campuses. You're an academic, you're cool, you're groovy. I am so glad that everybody has been here today. And I have to beg for money for a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to let you guys go and thank you once again for joining us today on Rethinking Heroes.